Sorry I didn't come yesterday. I wasn't feeling so
Good.
good.
Good. Feeling better then. It's good. That's what I mean good. Not good that you weren't feeling well. Moshe, you're well.
I am well. I had migraines last week, but I'm well this week.
Shalom Anan. Manishma. Yofi. Let's begin. We open up we're learning the mitzvot of Purim. We started to talk about reading the Megillah once at night and once in the day. And we ended up with a little bit of that you have to read the Megillah from a kosher Megillah. We mentioned that perhaps that's a little bit easier to write than a Sefer Torah. And we said that even if you have a word missing, or a few letters, as long as the majority of it is written kosher, it's still kosher. And that has a big ramification for, not only for writing the Megillah, you can, for somebody who's a beginner scribe, it's a good place to begin, because it won't be not kosher if you make a mistake. It also has a difference for us. All of us we don't write a Megillah, and most of us don't even read from a Megillah. We listen to the Chazan, who's the Baal Koreh, who reads the Megillah out loud. Why does that make a difference to us? That's what we're going to see right now. Okay, good morning, Ariel. Page 328. It's very important to know, because you may have been to Megillah reading before, but it tends to be quite loud. It tends to be disturbances.
Really?
The little children, the big children, all kinds of people that make noise in the middle. And it's difficult because you have to hear every word. And if you don't hear every word, you're not Yotze. So how do we do that in a big crowd? Oh, I missed what the Chazan said, so I have to start over from the beginning. And you can't do it out of order. So if you miss a few words, I gotta go catch the late rerun. Sometimes they have a second reading. There's a trick. Let's read about it here, and you'll see this is connected to what we said before.
So it's very much noisy.
It's very noisy, yes,
But
usually,
we only
most
need
places.
to be noisy when we hear the word of Haman.
Ideally, you should hear the word Haman and then make noise, and then stop making noise, and then start reading again. But we don't live in an ideal world. That's ideally the way it should be done. Sometimes people start making noise even before the Haman gets announced, because they know it's coming. And sometimes they keep going after the Haman for the next few words. And so by the time you can hear anything again, you've missed a few words. It's not kosher. Well, let's read the rules and then we'll take the questions, okay? Page 328, we're reading Pnei Halacha, the Laws of Purim, chapter 15, section 10. David, will you read for us this morning?
Sure. The mitzvah of reading the Megillah and the status of one who missed a word. To fulfill the mitzvah of reading the Megillah, one must read it from a kosher Megillah that was written in ink on parchment. If one recites it by heart or reads it from a printed book, he has not discharged his obligation. If one reads most of the Megillah from a kosher scroll and the rest from a book or from memory, he has fulfilled his obligation as long as he recites the entire Megillah without missing a word.
There's the key point right there. As long as you get 51% hearing from the kosher Megillah, the other 49, you can say it yourself. As long as you don't skip any word, you can say it yourself. So that's what they're for. You got to make sure that the reader doesn't skip a word, but if he does, you can fill it in yourself.
Okay.
If it's up to 49%, you can do that trick. So if you can't hear the Chazan reading because there's making noise, what do? Read it yourself, quietly, to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Those 3-5 words, 10 words, even if it's 20 words, as long as it's not 50%, it's still kosher. As long as you've got an entire complete Megillah reading, mostly it's going to be from listening to the reader from the parchment, and the minority of it, usually they'll come to 1%, 10%, 2% the most. A few words here and there, you'll fill in on your own. Reading from a chumash. You have not a chumash, because Tanakh,
Yeah.
Tanakh, or a Megillah. Go ahead.
Yes. However, if the reader skips a word or makes a mistake in one of the words that changes the meaning of the word, he has not discharged his obligation according to most poskim, and he must read the Megillah again properly. Even when the reader reads all the words properly, a listener does not discharge his obligation if he fails to hear one of the words. This is the most important practical halakha of Megillah reading because people sometimes fail to hear all of the words due to the excess noise caused by the presence of children in the synagogue. This problem becomes especially acute after Haman's name is read, as the reader sometimes continues reading before the children finish making noise, causing those who sit in the back of the synagogue to miss a word, thus forfeiting the entire reading.
They lose out. They lose out the whole reading if they don't fill in.
But I have a question.
Let him finish, and then we'll have the questions. The solution's here. I'm sure your question will be answered. Just one more paragraph.
If one misses a word while hearing the Megillah reading, the solution is to read the missed word or words immediately from the printed Megillah one is using. If, in the meantime, the reader continues to read ahead, one should continue reading until he catches up with the reader. Even though the printed book in front of him is not a kosher Megillah, he may use it to fill in the missing words, bediavad, since he hears the most of the Megillah from a kosher scroll. However, when listening to the Megillah from the reader, one should not read along with him from a printed version.
Okay,
So my
so now what's
question-
your question?
yeah,
Go
my
ahead.
question is,
Yeah.
so it's not a Yom Tov per se, like it's not a Yom Tov from the Torah, so we could use electronic.
That's
device.
right. That's right.
Why not just use a microphone to speakers?
Good question. So that's the question. I think he's going to relate to it. It's in the next paragraph, in the next section, in section 11. He talks about it. There's an issue whether when you hear someone reading, right? Somebody has to be reading from the Megillah. So when you listen to the reader, he's reading from a kosher Megillah, parchment, speaking into the microphone, and you're hearing the words through the microphone. The question is, are you hearing him, or are you hearing some digital sound? Because the way most microphones work, there's different kinds of microphones, but usually you're not actually hearing his voice.
What if you use an analog, completely analog?
Then then it might be easier. It might be allowed. But usually, what it is the voice, the sound gets broken down into bits, and then gets reconstituted again on the other but where the amplifier is. And so you're hearing a digital sound. You're not really hearing the original person's voice. That's why it's always best to when you're trying to, you must be listening to the reader to hear the real voice without a microphone.
So we had before yesterday we said that it's ideal to hear the Megillah with a large crowd.
Mm-hmm.
But since we have the problem with hearing all the words, maybe we just chose a small shul to listen to Megillah. Then we
There's always a conflict of values. This is the story of our lives. You're right. It's a balance. On one hand, it's better to have a big crowd. On the other hand, big crowd, you can't hear anything. So you have to find the correct medium. But we already have a solution. Even if you're in a big crowd, say those few words that you might be missing, even if it's 10 times you have to do that. It's okay. As long as you don't reach the 49% that you're reading, more than 50% that you're reading your own and not hearing, usually you hear 95% of the Megillah from the parchment. Fill in a few words here and there. That's the solution, okay? There is another solution. Some people who want to be machmir, and that is that even though they're not the reader who's standing up in front and reading out loud, they hold, instead of a chumash or a Tanakh, instead of a Megillah, they hold a kosher Megillah, a second one. Pay some money to a sofer, even if you're not going to be the one who's holding the parchment that everybody's going to be listening to, you have your own. And then, if you can't hear his words, you'll be reading your words, not from just any old book, but from a proper parchment. That's a chumrah. Some people do, and that's a nice thing. Yeah.
So so Sefer Torah, they're anywhere from $20,000 to $100,000. How much are we talking for just a Megillah?
It's a good question. Couple thousand. I think I can't recall right now, but I think $1,000, maybe $2,000. I don't know exactly, but it's something. It's much more doable, much more doable than $20,000.
So I just wanted to give an anecdote. I remember when I was very little, when I was at a Megillah reading, what they did before they started the Megillah reading is the Rabbi got up and he made an announcement that for the making of noise during Haman's name, we were only allowed to do it for 5 seconds. And what he would do is when they said Haman's name, he'd stand in front, he'd go 5, 4,
Nice.
3,
that's
2,
good. Very good
1.
solution.
Not bad. Did it work?
It worked on the little kids. Some of the older kids weren't happy. Some of the older kids, like not.
It's always the
bar
big
mitzvah
kids. That's
Not
it.
bar mitzvah age kids. So they were asked to leave halfway through.
Wow.
But we need
Yeah.
a strong speaker.
Yeah. So in my community, my next door neighbor was where I was the rabbi. Is what I mean. Now I'm not the rabbi. I'm just a regular Joe Schmo. I try to sit in the back. You know. Crack the shells of the peanuts and throw them at the. No. I don't do it. But when I was the rabbi, so we had this issue. So I asked my neighbor, who was an electrician, and he actually made a stoplight. Red, yellow, green. And so when green went, go ahead, make noise. And then we made yellow, so just get ready to stop. And then red. It worked a little bit. It's cute. Okay, so that's really the most important law of the Megillah. Just to restate, reading the Megillah, you have to hear the entire Megillah when the majority of it is from a kosher parchment. If you're not reading it yourself, you're hearing somebody who's reading from a kosher parchment. But because only you have to have a majority read from the kosher parchment, you can fill in whatever you don't hear, either off by heart or from the text you have in front of you. But it has to be in order, right? So if you're making up, you can't make up once the reader went on without you. You have to catch up to him. So read quickly to catch up to him, and then you'll hear the rest from the reader. That's what we said. Oh, Yossi, yeah.
I know there are some customs who don't stamp out every part of Haman's name in the Torah.
Sure.
In the Megillah.
Yeah.
What's the loophole there?
Well, it's not really a law. It's a custom. You don't have to make noise. There is a custom. I like to keep the customs. I think it's important to keep the customs. But I think the original custom was they would write Haman's name on the bottom of your shoe. And then every time you hear his name, you stamp it out. Right? It doesn't have to be. Now, you go to the corner store. They're selling... What is it called? Guns, right? What is it called? Cap guns. Cap guns. Yeah, cap guns. And then, one thing leads to the next. Then there's explosives. There's firecrackers. It's dangerous. People really get hurt. So you have to. That's it. I have the loudest noisemaker in the shul of hundreds of people, and I stopped using it. Because it's just it hurt me. It hurt me, let alone the rest of the people. But I whatever. And I have a big grogger, not just a tiny one. If you're gonna do it properly. But then I don't want to hurt people's ears, especially after the fast, like we talked about at night. But yeah, it's fun to make noise. But we have to be fulfilling our obligation to read the Megillah too. So it's a balance. Someone else, another question, Renan? Yeah. Sorry, so there's no law that you have to make noise for 10 seconds or 30 seconds or a minute. So some people, if it's, for example, a bunch of old people who don't have any patience for the little kids and they just want a quiet, peace and quiet, you don't have to stamp out Haman at all. Some people, you go like this, like in the Commons. Here. Right? That's like... There's a British way of making noise, right? So if you want to be careful to keep the custom, every time you hear Haman, go like this, or say boo underneath your.
Imagine, it will be crazy. Like if you're sitting there, you're trying to hit the chazan and someone like you maybe make great noise and you just lose your hearing.
Yeah, that could be dangerous. You got to be careful about that.
Then you can't fulfill the obligation anymore. Then.
That's also true. Renan, what was your question? Yeah.
miss a word
Yes.
from the Hazan,
You,
or if I read from a kosher Megillah in my own,
yes.
I need to read loudly. For
You don't have to hear yourself. No. You just have to say the words from the text, reading from the text. Yeah, it doesn't have to be out loud. No.
if I miss the reading of the Hazan and I read in my own,
Yeah.
I
Say it quietly to yourself. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then catch up to him because you want to do the majority should be from him.
If
Just to-
I miss at all, if I wasn't in the shore or something happened, I don't know.
Then you need a kosher Megillah and you read it to yourself.
But read loudly, or no?
It's best to read it out loud, but you don't have to. No, you don't have to. Yeah.
So if someone's wearing digital hearing aids, modern digital hearing aids,
Mm-hmm.
and if they take them out, they cannot hear the reader. If they put them in, they can hear the reader. Have they fulfilled the obligation?
So that goes back to David's question. What's the status of these amplification instruments? And it's not ideal, so we try to avoid it. But the bottom line is there's many different types of machinery and the way they work. And for somebody who has no choice, it's obviously better than nothing. It's not absolutely forbidden. It's not absolutely not the sound, because for all intents and purposes, we all know that the sound we get out of our little machines in our pockets is much better than the recording machines they used that was this big 50 years ago. And so the quality of the sound is so amazing. So there's room to be lenient. So for somebody who can't hear otherwise, who uses hearing aids, for sure, I don't think anybody would say that they have to take out their hearing aids and go right up to the chazan and go like that. Some people might do that, but I think there's room to be lenient.
Some deaf people, what they'll do is they will go to, when they're blowing the shofar, they will go up to the person blowing the shofar and they'll hold on to the shofar. Because they feel the shofar's vibration, and that's what's the difference between the vibration of your hand and the vibration of your eardrum.
Well, we all know there's a big difference. One causes sound, the other one doesn't. You don't hear.
One's more sensitive.
But if that's the best you can do. But that's another good example of another mitzvah where it's a mitzvah to hear the shofar. So you have a mitzvah of hearing. Yeah, David, you wanted to say something else? Thanks, I don't want any, thank you.
Deaf person, what would you do? If someone is completely deaf, can't hear anything.
He's patur. He's exempt.
Okay.
If you don't have the tools, if you don't have an arm, you don't have to put on tefillin. Chas v'chalila.
Okay, that's a different
you can't put it
on the other hand.
You put it on the other hand, or put it on your head. But if you don't have a head, you're patur from tefillin.
You cannot.
Okay, from the head tefillin. Okay, there's a few other laws about the brachot and about So let's read them. Section 11, page 330. Michael, will you read for us, please?
The laws of reading the Megillah. When not in use, the Megillah is rolled up from the end of the scroll to the beginning. However, since Megillat Esther is referred to as a letter, it is customary to prepare the scroll for reading in public by spreading it out and folding it over, leaf over leaf, in order to publicize the miracle. When the reading is completed, the Megillah is rolled up again from end to beginning, making sure that it is not left open out of respect for the Megillah. Only after the Megillah is rolled up does the Chazan recite the Berecha of Harav et Refeinu.
We're going to learn about the brachot in just a minute in the next section. But the bottom line is you see that the Chazan is doing some fancy footwork with with the scroll. Before he starts, he's basically unrolling the scroll and reading from it section by section. It doesn't the Sefer Torah, it remains rolled up, right? Also, the Megillah usually is only on one stick, not two sticks like the Sefer Torah. That's the way we distinguish from a Megillah and a Sefer Torah. But the many times the Megillah refers to Igeret HaPurim Azot. Igeret is a letter. And so, like in the ancient times, there's a royal proclamation. Someone comes in, that's right, and he holds up the scroll. Look at that, the scroll. This is the way scrolls used to be. So we read from the scroll, but we open it up first, so it's like we're reading the letter. Not just like we're reading from a closed book. These are beautiful customs. Let's keep going. Michael, go ahead.
One may sit or stand while fulfilling the mitzvah of reading the Megillah. The only one who must stand is the reader, out of respect for the congregation. Most Jews have a custom to stand for the berachot.
Okay, good.
The Megillah, according to Ben Ishai and Purim.
Mm-hmm.
The Megillah should be read with its conciliation, but if no one knows how to read it with the conciliations, it may be read without the conciliation. Be the avat.
Right. After the fact, b'diavad. Yeah, after the fact. After the fact. In other words, it's not the ideal way of performing the mitzvah. Best to know someone who knows the proper tune. But at the end of the day, you hear the words read, even without the tune, it's still kosher. Okay, Thomas, take over, please.
So one must read the Megillah in order. If one reads it out of order, it does not fulfill his obligation. For example, if one misses a word or a verse during the reading, you should not say, I will continue listening to the Megillah until the end, and I will make out what I miss afterward. Rather, he must immediately fill in what he missed, catch up to the reader, and continue listening to the reading, in the proper order until the end of the Megillah.
Good, as we said before. Keep going.
One dozes off.
Dozes off. Yeah, that happens. Oh, boy.
While listening to the Megillah, does not discharge his obligation, as he certainly fails to hear some words, as we learned above, section 9. One who hears the Megillah fulfills obligation, even if he does not understand Hebrew. The Chatchila, one should read the Megillah continuously, but b'diavad, if one interrupts the reading in the middle, remaining silent or even speaking, he has not forfeited what the
forfeited is given up on. Yeah.
What he already read, and may continue reading from where he left.
So if you talk to your friend in the middle, you shouldn't be talking. There's a bracha before, there's a bracha after, we'll see. So you shouldn't make any interruptions. But if you do, you say to the kid in front of you, hey, shut up, I can't hear anything. Oh. Sorry, you spoke in the middle. As long as you hear all the words of the Megillah, or you catch up those words that you didn't hear because you were giving someone else tochacha, don't do that. Don't try this at home, folks. But it's just trying to say why you might be speaking in the middle. Your son, whatever, it's still kosher. You haven't forfeited reading the Megillah as long as you hear every word or say the words that you miss. Go ahead. Many poskim maintain. Here's David's question.
Many poskim maintain that one who hears the Megillah through an electric device like telephone, radio, or loudspeaker does not fulfill his obligation. The reason for this is that such devices receive a person's voice as electronic signals and transform it back into a new voice. Therefore, it's like hearing a recording of the Megillah reading, which is invalid. The Hakila, one should heed his opinion.
Okay, there's a debate. So as someone who has no choice, has to rely on the lenient opinions, but we try to avoid it if we can. Yeah. So, okay, so far so good. Yes, Amos.
Sorry, I wasn't here, but that means if someone has the listener
hearing aids, yeah.
That means that
he realizes that that's the best he can do. So he'll want to prove that those lenient opinions are correct, so that he can fulfill the obligation. Okay, Renan, you're on for section 12 on page 331.
Brachot in the order of the reading. We recite 3 brachot before the nighttime reading. Who has sanctified us with his mitzvot and commanded us concerning the reading of the Megillah.
That's the first one.
Okay, Asher Kedeshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al mikra Megillah.
Amen. No. Amen.
Who perform
Usually the reader says the bracha and you just answer amen. Go ahead.
Who performed miracles for our ancestors in those days at this time.
When else do we say that bracha? Good, excellent. What's the commonality between Chanukah and Purim? Both rabbinic, but more than that, I said yesterday, the nature of both mitzvot is similar.
Someone wants to kill
to publicize the miracle, Ariel said. To publicize the miracle. So this is about Sha'asa Nisim La'avoteinu. It's about to publicize the miracles. So this is the bracha where we publicize the miracle. And the third bracha is, go ahead.
And who has given us life, sustained us, and brought us to this time.
שהחיינו. יפה. יפה. Keep going.
The brachot prepare us for the mitzvah, focusing the reading and the listeners on fulfilling the mitzvah and understanding its purpose. To remember and publicize the miracle that God performed for our ancestors. Nevertheless, one who reads the Megillah without reciting a bracha fulfills his obligation, as long as he intends to fulfill the mitzvah.
Okay, most cases. If you do the mitzvah without the bracha, you still did the mitzvah. Just didn't do it in the proper way, ideal way. But you shake a lulav, you shook the lulav. You heard the shofar, whether or not you said the bracha before or not, you did the mitzvah. So that's same here in the Megillah. Go ahead.
There are varying customs regarding the recitation of the Shechianu during the day. According to the Sephardic custom, one does not recite Shechianu during the day because the Shechianu recite at night covers the entire day. According to the Ashkenazi custom, one must repeat the bracha prior to the daytime reading because the reading is an independent mitzvah. Moreover, the daytime reading is more important reading of the tune. Therefore, its brachot cannot be covered by the brachot recited at the nighttime reading.
But there's a middle ground. Keep going. When reciting Shechianu before the Megillah reading in the daytime, therefore, what do Ashkenazim do? On the one hand, Sephardim don't say Shechianu. They said it already the night before. But the Ashkenazim do. But why double it? So there's a trick. Go ahead.
When reciting Shechianu before the Megillah reading, it is proper to have in mind that the bracha also applies to the other mitzvot of the day. The Shloah Manot La Evionim, and the festive meal. Sephardim have these mitzvot in mind at night, while Ashkenazim do so during the day. Continue?
Yep.
After the Megillah is read, and the scroll is rolled back to the beginning, common custom is to recite Rav et Chivenu, bracha of praise and thanksgiving. According to the most posting, this bracha is recited only when the Megillah is read in the presence of 10 men or women. If fewer than 10 people are present, however, we do not recite the bracha.
And if you want to see the entire debate about it, you can look down to the footnote. There's lots of debate. But the bottom line is, the standard is we do say the bracha, usually reading with a public, with 10 people. So you say...
5 men, 5 women,
there is room to be lenient. There's usually a woman that doesn't count for a minyan, as we know, because usually a minyan is formed in order to perform something called a davar shebikdusha. One of the things where the rabbis, one of the holy rituals the rabbis said you have to have a minyan for, and the minyan is learned out in the Talmud that a minyan is only men. And like Baruch Hu, Kedusha, Kaddish, all those things, you need 10 men. But there are some people that say there's a second form of a minyan. Not for Davar Shebikdusha, but the purpose of the minyan here, in this case, is to publicize the miracle. And for that, maybe women count for the minyan. It's a fascinating, by the way, also by Chanukah candles. There's a custom to light the menorah in shul, even though it's a little strange. You're only supposed to light the Chanukah at home. But there is a custom to do it in shul. So they say do it with 10 people present. And then you're publicizing the miracle. And there's room to be lenient when there's, if there's only 9 men and there's a woman. Because this is a different type of minyan. It's a fascinating little wrinkle of halacha. People say women don't count for a minyan. It's usually true, but there are exceptional cases, and this is one of them, and that's why it's a little bit, there's a lot of discussion in the footnote. We won't go into it right now, okay? We're going to move ahead. I want to skip to the, there's Torah reading. You add the Al Hanisim. We've said this before. You guys are used to it. We don't say Tachnun. By the way, today is Monday, the 13th of Adar.
No, 14.
14th, I think.
Oh, but no, it's
Oh, no,
14th
it's
of February.
13th. Yes, 14th of February. Yeah,
Really?
It's the 13th of Adar.
Ah.
So
That means
today would have been Purim.
no. Today would have been Ta'anit Esther.
Tomorrow we are Purim Katan.
Tomorrow is the 14th of Adar, which is called Purim Katan, the one we don't celebrate. However, we celebrate it a little bit.
We don't say Tachnun.
We don't say Tachnun. Not only on the actual Purim, but also on Purim Katan. And not only that, we have 2 days off, because the 15th is also Purim for the walled cities. We talked about that a little bit. And so there's 2 days without Tachnun, both in the second Adar and in the first Adar. So party on, okay? In the coming 2 days, no Tachnun. I hope you said it with great kavanah today, because it's a beautiful prayer. And okay, let's skip to section 15, please, with your permission. Just before section 15 on page 337, I will add one more halacha that he adds in. A lot of people don't know this. It says here, it is customary to wear Shabbat or Yom Tov clothing on Purim, both at night and during the day. So you'll see some people don't know this, and they wear regular clothing, but they're wrong. The Ramah says it's the custom to put on your Shabbat finest. The reason why it gets complicated is because many times people put on a costume. So it's not your Shabbat finest if you're wearing your Superman suit, right? So, or your Queen Esther dress, whatever it is. So some people say put on your costume only after the services, because you should be dressed up for the reading of the Megillah. It's a mitzvah. You should be dressed properly, dressed in your finest, like Shabbat. Some people they wear their Shabbat clothes, but a funny hat, somewhere in the middle. So I'll sort of break down break the rule, break the regular framework just a little bit. There's a few questions here. You wanted to say something, and then I'll take yours. Yeah.
If I'm right, it's forbidden for men to wear costumes of women.
It's a very good question.
What you called about your costume of Queen Esther. It's Asur.
Good question. It's coming up in the next chapter. We're going to get to it very soon. Purim might be an exception.
Oh, wow.
Yes. So if you have some kind of a hidden secret will to cross-dress, we won't talk about it now, but well, I have a couch out in the next room, and we'll talk about the issues you have. But no, seriously,
Why would it be an exception on Purim?
For the sake of joy, we're going to talk about it in the next chapter. Yeah, for the sake of joy, it's a way of having fun. It's a way of having fun. Aha. Okay. Okay. Tov. Okay. Yes, Michael. We're going to discuss it. Hang on. Wait a few minutes. We're going to see. Yes, Michael.
The Purim Katans also
Yeah.
customary to dress up?
No.
No. Okay.
No. The way most people celebrate Purim Katan is the way I celebrated Tu B'Shvat. Anybody remember?
Yes, true.
What did I do on Tu B'Shvat to celebrate?
Not the
I just didn't say Tachnun. That's how most people celebrate Purim Katan also. You don't really celebrate it. You just, you don't say Tachnun. There's a little, some people, they'll take the opportunity, like the Chabad, they take every opportunity to have a joyous celebration of Judaism. It's a great idea. Why not? There is even, it says in the halacha, some people have a custom to have a bigger meal than usual on the Purim Katan. So it's a good thing. It's a good thing. As a matter of fact, this year, I'm going to speak to Rav Lissman about it. They're making a big party, big concert, in honor of Rav Tzvi Yehuda HaKohen Kook, who was the mentor and rabbi of Rav Bigon. And he died on Purim. So most years, there's only one Purim. So you're in the middle of the festivities and going to the cemeteries. It just doesn't fit so well. But this year, there's 2 Adars. So they're having the commemoration, and this year's 40 years since his passing. 40 years since Rav Tzvi Yehuda HaKohen Kook died. And so they're having a big event with music and speakers and the students teaching about his life and legacy. just over here in the Binyanei Uma. Tickets are all sold out, but I was thinking maybe we'd get some showing here in the Machon. I mean, it's all in Hebrew, but the songs, the Jewish singers, some of the most popular Jewish singers will be singing there, and it's an event. It's in Binyanei Uma, but it's going to be on all the news, news outlets, media outlets.
What's it called?
It's a commemoration for 40 years of Rav Tzvi Yehuda HaKohen Cook. Binyanei Uma is the convention center, just over here. Yeah, the Israel Convention Center, right across from the Tachana Merkazit. Yeah, that's why I'm pointing, because it's just over there, just about a kilometer away. Okay, so let's go to section 337, page 337, section 15, working on Purim. Amos, will you read for us, please?
The sages did not originally establish Purim as a holiday on which work is prohibited. Over time, however, the Jewish people developed the custom to refrain from work on Purim out of respect for the sanctity of the day and the custom of binding. The sages go so far as to say that anyone who works on Purim will never see my blessing from it. Therefore, any may not go about his regular work on Purim if whoever refraining from work would cause him or his employer a great loss. He may work on Purim. In addition, a poor person who has nothing to eat may work on Purim.
The bottom line is, it's not really forbidden by law, but by custom, we don't work. So we avoid it if you can. If you can't work, if you can't avoid it, then you're allowed to work if that's your job, and you'll be fired from your job. So you work. It's possible. It's not prohibited. Of course, somebody who's getting drunk should be on the job should be fired in any case. You got to be careful. Sorry. But if you're needed at the job and there's no way getting around it, it's not prohibited.
So like during the day of the 14th?
That's Purim Day, yeah.
But like Purim starts at night, no?
No, well, here in Jerusalem you're talking about.
Yes.
So there's, I celebrate the 14th. I celebrate the 14th. You celebrate the 15th. So you're saying the other day, that for sure, there's no problem working. It's not your Purim. If you're not celebrating Purim that day, you just don't say Tachlan. That's the only, but other than that, it's a regular day. Just like we're going to work on Purim Katan, you're going to work on the other Purim, which you're not celebrating. It's a work day. No problem. Yeah. Okay? Let's keep going. Yossi, top of page 338.
One may do joyous work on Purim, like preparing a new home for a son who will soon be married and planting decorative trees in one's yard. In addition, one may do mitzvah-related work, like writing down novel Torah insights. One may also do easy work, like writing a letter. All of this is permitted, provided that it does not ruin one's joy or prevent one from performing the mitzvah of Purim.
Okay, so nowadays, what does that mean? You can check your email, right? You can do emails that's not considered work. It's if it makes you happy. If it makes you upset, you don't want to look at your work, by all means, take the day off. And the last paragraph, Ariella, read the last paragraph, because you asked about it.
One may cut one.
No, last paragraph. Go skip to the bottom of the page.
The custom?
Residents, page 338.
Residents of unwalled cities may work on the Purim observed by residents of walled cities, and residents of walled cities may work on the Purim observed by residents of unwalled cities.
Okay, so
Interesting. Just switching on.
Yeah.
that's what I tried to say before, but he said it. And if you understood me or you understood him, either one, that's what we meant to say.
Everybody should work.
Confusing.
I get it.
It's confusing when you have two different dates for the same holiday. So for some people it's the holiday, for some people it's not. That's why it's very unique in the Jewish. Yeah, due to Purims, we'll talk about that in the last chapter. Yeah.
Day off today and you take day off tomorrow.
Exactly. That's right. We've only talked about one of the mitzvot of Purim. Reading the Megillah. Okay? and maybe a little bit of the prayer service and working and so forth. But there's three others. The three others are associated with joy. That's it. So that's the next chapter. Let's begin. Yossi, go ahead. Read chapter 16 for us, the top of the page.
16, joy and kindness. On Purim we are commanded to observe them as days of feasting and joy, of sending gifts, mishloach manot, to one another, and presents to the poor, matanot le'evyonim. The mitzvah to rejoice on Purim is quite unique, as it finds expression even in the physical aspects of life. Just as Haman's decree targeted our soul and body alike, so too our joy over our salvation should be both spiritual and physical. Therefore, in addition to the mitzvah of reading the Megillah, which gives expression to man's spiritual side, there is a mitzvah to prepare a festive and joyous meal, soda. During this meal, an emphasis is placed on drinking wine, to the point where one loses his mental capacity to a certain degree. This expresses the notion that the Jewish people are holy and that even in a state of diminished mental capacity, they remain connected and close to God.
Okay, so that's, they say, as opposed to Chanukah, the other rabbinic holiday, which is to publicize the miracle, on Chanukah there's no mitzvah to have a meal. I know there's a custom to eat the jelly donuts, sufganiyot, and I told you about the, my custom. The first night, 1 sufganiya, second night, 2 sufganiyot, third night, 3, etc. We talked about that.
See, I use factorials. So on the night before, I have 1. On the first day, I have 1. The second day, I have 2. The third day, I have 6. The fourth day, I have
24.
24.
Yafa.
And then 120.
Right. Well done. So you really don't have to have any meal on Chanukah. And why? How do you celebrate? You're lighting the candles. Well, on Chanukah, if we would just bow down to the idol, if we would become Hellenists, we could survive. We would live. It was a fight against the spirit. It was a religious persecution, which is purely spiritual, and therefore we celebrate it with a purely spiritual mitzvah of lighting candles. On Purim, they wanted to wipe out our souls and our bodies, right? To destroy every man, woman, and child. And so the celebration takes the character of not just spiritual character, but physical side. We must have a meal.
Still think Chanukah's better.
You haven't had the kreplach in my home in the Purim meal, but okay. Natan, you with us?
Yes.
Bottom page 339. This joy must be accompanied by a heightened sense of love.
This joy must be accompanied by a heightened sense of love and unity among Jews. This is true joy, as it expresses a broadening of life and it's spread through the love of all people. However, one who eats and drinks for their own sake is considered narrow and limited, preoccupied only with gratifying his own desires. Such a person will never attain genuine joy. Thus, we are commanded to send gifts of food, mishloach manot, to one another. We should not content ourselves with increasing love among friends. Rather, we must also care about the destitute who are unable to rejoice fully. Therefore, we are commanded to give gifts to the poor, matanot le'evyonim, so that they too can partake in the joy of Purim. Anyone who disregards the pain of the destitute, even if he thinks that he is enjoying himself with his friends, is in reality engaging in
Debauchery.
Ignoring the realities of life. He flees thoughts about the suffering in this world so that he can have some fleeting happiness. But the harsh reality will not disappear when he drinks wine and becomes intoxicated. Therefore, deep down he knows that he does not deserve to be happy and he will remain miserable. However, if one makes sure to bring joy to the poor and unfortunate, his life has value and he can give truly righteous. He can truly and rightfully rejoice. This is why we are commanded to give gifts to the poor on Purim.
Okay, so we have 3 mitzvot that are connected to joy and unity. The seudah, the mitzvah to have a meal, which makes you happy. But it's not only a meal and you're celebrating that we survived physically, but we don't want it to remain for ourselves. So we give some of our meal to our friends. That's mishloach manot. Mana is a portion. When you go to the store, to the restaurant or the cafeteria, it's called a mana. When you get a portion, you get your whatever portion it is. You get the piece of chicken with some mashed potatoes and some carrots. That's called a portion. It's called a mana. So mishloach means the sending a manot. There's a story in the Talmud, I'll probably quote it soon, where they were having the Purim Suda, these 2 rabbis, and they say to each other, hey, I haven't given mishloach manot yet. We still have a mitzvah to do. And the other guy said, well, I haven't either. And you know what they did? He took his plate and he gave it to him. He took his plate and gave it to him. He said, all right, we did our mitzvah of mishloach manot. And we'll see that that's really the origin of the concept of mishloach manot. You give food. It has to be ready-made food. We're going to see all the details in a few minutes, or tomorrow probably. But it has to be food that's edible. Some people you can't give. I know some people. There's all sorts of cultures. Some people give nowadays. The mishloach manot comes in a fancy dish. The dish costs hundreds of shekels, and they're giving basically a gift, like a house gift, But there has to be at least some food in there, because you can't give mishloach manot of a salad bowl without the salad in it. You got to have the food. The food is because we want to celebrate together, to have that unity. And then, of course, you should be giving to the poor as well. And that's the separate mitzvah of matanot le'avinim. It doesn't have to be foodstuffs. That's just to support the poor and to share the joy, that they should be joyous. If you're joyous and they're just sitting there freezing in the cold and they don't have anything to eat, so then that's a real stain on your joy. Well, we'll have some questions. Yeah, you'll see, and then we'll go around. Yeah.
If someone's poor, then technically they're exempt from the mitzvah of giving to the poor, no? Because otherwise, there's no.
It's very interesting. We're gonna see the details soon, but it's not so simple. The truth is, someone, even if he's poor, should be giving tzedakah, and especially on Purim, when he gets some tzedakah, he should give some as well. Everybody has to give something, even the poor. So we'll see more details about it in just a minute. It's the next topic. I almost had a question.
Sometimes I saw that they collect the food in the front of store in those days. Is that considered this?
So they do that all year round sometimes. It's good to give donations for people that don't have enough food. On Purim, so we're going to see the details, that these gifts must be handed out, delivered. The word mishloach means sent, on Purim. And so it's not good enough if you do it 2 days before or 2 days afterwards. So that's why specifically on the day of Purim, there's going to be a lot of traffic in the streets. Usually people carrying baskets or food to one another. And you'll see more questions, Rina.
There's a minimum of mishloach manot.
We're going to get to the laws of the minimum in just a minute. Yes, Thomas?
For mishloach manot, it's better if I use a shliach or I deliver?
We're going to get to that detail as well. Yes, David.
Question. For example, I received mana from a friend, and I give him also mana. So then I meet another friend, and the only thing I have is the mana from the friend I received before. Can I give it to him?
This is the biggest problem on mishloach manot. It's like the terror of every home, because of course everybody recycles. You get some gifts and you give them to others, because how many packages do you make up? If you know you're going to get 10 packages, you're going to give 10 packages. You only make up one But usually, some people like to give the gift they prepared. Sometimes we bake home-baked stuff, whatever. But sometimes you don't have enough, or everybody recycles. But the problem is that sometimes you forget to take off the note. So you give them a nice mishloach manot to your neighbors. This is from the Goldberg family. Who's the Goldberg family? That's the people that gave it to you. But you said take it off the note and put the Weinberg family in it. That's it's a mistake that happens often because people do recycle all the time. The little problems of living in a community. But it's nice to live in a community and to have that. Okay, another question. Ariel, you wanted to ask something?
Since we're going to go over all these topics soon.
You're catching on. You're catching on. That's
I guess from what we learned here is we want to get our joy from helping others.
Share it with others, and also give to others as well. Correct. Okay. There's a real big emphasis on Jewish unity on Purim, and I want to show you why. If you look at the top of page 341, or the bottom of 340, actually, the same page that we're on. If you look at the bottom, the disunity of the Jewish people at the time enabled Haman to denounce them before King Ahasuerus, because Haman said there is a certain people scattered and dispersed among the other peoples in all provinces of your realm. And so they're scattered and dispersed. They're not together. So they're weak, and we can get them. And that's Haman devised his plan. And as a reaction, how did Mordechai and Esther choose to defend against this persecution? Top of page 341. Esther tells Mordechai, go assemble all the Jews who live in Shushan and fast on my behalf. They're not drinking for 3 days. So assembling the Jews, gathering them together is a method of nullifying the decree by Jewish unity. So we really need the unity and the togetherness, and these mitzvot foster the love between the different members of the community. That's the general idea, okay? We're going to see some more details, but it'll have to be tomorrow. We'll continue with the specific details of Mishloach Manot and Matanot Le'Evyonim. How much you have to give, how many people, how many poor people, types of foods, all that's coming up tomorrow. Bezrat Hashem. Thank you.